Well, this is Brent Allen Winters, commonlawyer.com, www.commonlawyer.com, coming at you from the remote hinterlands of the Wabash River Valley, where the hogs, the frogs, and the dogs keep up a racket all night long. Okay, here it is, Constitution of the United States Catechism, a series of questions and answers that the student learns. Question 51 out of 333. May the people of one state choose a person who is an inhabitant of another state to be a member of the House of Representatives. May a person of one state be chosen. May they choose another person who is an inhabitant of another state to be a member of the United States House of Representatives. And the answer is no. He must live in the state where he is chosen. I'm going to tell you a story about that. He must live in the state where he is chosen. Remember, he must have lived in the United States 7 years. He can't be a foreigner, just comes here and runs for office. He must be a resident. But he must live in the state where he is chosen. Now, how does that figure out? Well, when I was running for Congress, I met a lot of fellows running for Congress. I met this one guy that had ran for Congress in 3 different states, in 3 different primaries, the same year. I said, how do you do that? He said, well, the Constitution doesn't require that I have to have had lived in any particular state or any period of time before running for Congress in that state. So if I lose a primary in this state, I just come over here, rent an apartment here, and run in this state and run in the primary in that state, which is at a different time than the primary in another state. He did it 3 times in one election cycle in 1 year, and he fulfilled the requirements of the Constitution because he lived in those states. He resided in those each one of those states, and if he got elected, of course, he had intent to remain there. Was that lawful? Yes, it was. Is that an abuse of the law? I believe it is. Now, you can abuse law. You can use law, as the Bible says, unlawfully. And the law is good, says Paul the Apostle, if it's used lawfully. Hillary Clinton did that. She ran for U.S. Senate in a place where she did not live, and, well, she moved there, but she wasn't from there, didn't know anything about the state of New York and the city of New York, but she knew people would vote for her there, so she rented an apartment there, ran for U.S. Senate, and won. Is that lawful? As a matter of technicality, yes. Is it proper? I believe it's an abuse of the law. That's my personal position. But that's what she did. She stayed in Senate a long time, long enough she could run for U.S. president. You ought to be well known. And that was the idea. How about Newt Gingrich? Newt Gingrich was the Speaker of the House during the Republican Revolution of the 1990s. That's when I was involved in politics. Where's Newt Gingrich from? Was he from Georgia, where he was congressman? No. I've talked to the folks that worked for him. Here's what he did. Where was he from? I don't remember. It wasn't Georgia. He shopped around the country to find a district that he believed, according to the studies that his staff had done, he believed he could get elected in. And he would not run in a district that was an uphill battle. He wanted to go someplace where he was guaranteed if the money was put in, he'd become congressman. And then, of course, he wanted to be Speaker of the House of Representatives, 3rd in line for the presidency. He did all that. He certainly wasn't a Southern boy. He wasn't from Georgia. Didn't have a clue what things were really like. He had a flaming. I met him. Don't tell me about it. I met him. I sat down and talked to him. A flaming sodomite as his chief of staff. That's Washington, D.C. Was he Republican? Was he conservative? Oh, yeah, all that. Then he switched from Protestant to Roman Catholic so he could have more power and more influence. He finally figured out how that works. That's what happened. But you don't have to live, you don't have to have had resided in a state to run for Senate or U.S. House. That's the point I'm making. But it's good to know the law. That's what we're trying to do here, is get the fundamentals. Well, I wanted to mention that real quick about the Catechism. Let's see what the next question is. Maybe we can do another one. How many persons may be chosen by each state as members of the House of Representatives? Answer. The number of representatives of any state is in proportion to the number of people in that state. At present, this is back in 1828, every 40,000 people send one representative to Congress. But this has been and may be altered with the increase of the number of people. Well, back then that was true. It is fixed now. California has more representatives in Congress of the United States than any other state because between 40 and 50 million people live in that one state called California. California has more than Illinois. Illinois has about 12.5 million people. Half of them can see the Sears Tower in downtown Chicago on a clear day, if that tells you anything. Same thing is true in California. Over half the voters can see, or near enough to see, if there was a way to, downtown Los Angeles, downtown San Francisco, downtown San Diego. That's the problem we have in America today. But Illinois has more representatives in Congress, about 25 or something, than Wyoming. How many does Wyoming have? One. Because not many people live in Wyoming. Probably just over 500,000 instead of 12 million or 50 million. But no matter how much population a state has, it's always still entitled to one representative in the House of Representatives. Alaska doesn't have many people. About 700,000 people live in Alaska, if I remember right, a little over 700,000. That'll rate one representative just because they're a state. Some states, I believe, I remember Montana had two. And when I was running, I don't know what they have now. But when our country started, it was believed, and rightly so, that any representation of one man in the Congress or the State House, any representation of over 30,000 persons is no representation at all. Let me repeat that. They believed, and rightly so, that any representation over 30,000 people, of one man over 30,000 people, is no representation at all. And when this was written, it was one man for the population had gone up since our country started. It was about 30,000 was the max. They said, we don't want to go beyond that. And here he says right now, at that time, 1828, there was one representative in Congress for every 40,000. Well, see, when the country started, there were only about between 2.5 and 3 million people here. We're talking Americans. We're not including the red men tribes that lived here, unless they had assimilated. But about 2.5, 3 million. By the time you get to the year 1800, not very far, not very long from the beginning of our country, there were in the neighborhood of 12 million. The immigration was really picking up. By the time we get to 1828, we're getting up to pushing 20 million. And so it went from 30,000 people per congressional district to 40,000. When I was running, it was in the 600,000s. Now it's up in the 700,000s. That, my friends, is no representation at all. They believed that. They'd done studies on it. Men have done studies since, and yeah, that's true. That's why you write a letter to your congressman or your senator, and they send you back a form letter. They don't care what you say. All they care, there's nothing personal about it. All they care is that they find, well, I get a letter, I get 100 letters on this question that say I ought to go this way. Well, that helps, yes, but there's nothing personal in it. Try to talk to a congressman. You may get one that'll be personal. Doubt that any of them would ever take any interest in you. Personally. You don't really know your congressman anymore. I mean, 30,000 people is a lot of people to represent. How could you even know him then? That's why it's important, and they said this at the beginning, that your state legislature chooses your senators. You can't get a hold of a senator. No, they're too highfalutin. They're too up there. They're too important to talk to you. And you won't talk to them unless you're an insider and have millions of dollars. Help put them back in office. Oh, yeah, maybe then. But understand something. If the state legislatures were choosing the senators as our Constitution was originally written, that would go a long ways to helping us, because you can get to know your state legislature sometimes. They're not just highfalutin. They're down home. They're people that live among you. Or you can just say to them, look, either straighten up and fly right, or we're going to throw your carcass out of office. And you can tell them personally. You can tell their mother if you know them. That's the way that works. Well, this is Brent Allen Winters, commonlawyer.com, www.commonlawyer.com, coming at you from the remote hinterlands of the Wabash River Valley, where the hogs, the frogs, and the dogs keep up a racket all night long.